The hum of Nebula Station's fusion core thrummed through the corridors like a living heartbeat, a deep, steady pulse that resonated in every steel girder and ventilation shaft. Some said the station itself was alive, a vast, mechanical leviathan, drifting at the edge of known space, its glow visible even from the orbit of Villery Prime. Tonight, its song was deeper than usual, a warning and an invitation to those who could hear its hidden rhythms. Nova Drake moved through the shadows, her form melting into darkness as easily as ink in water. She wore the standard issue assassin's cloak, light enough to allow total freedom of movement, lined with nanoweave fiber to dampen sound, and tinted in the muted charcoal of deep space. Her boots made no more noise than a whisper. Her breathing was controlled, each inhale calibrated to avoid detection. In her hand, she carried the weapon they called the Lacrimosa Edge, a crystalline blade forged from neutron star plasma, its delicate lattice glowing with a pale blue light that pulsed in time. With her heart, for 12 months, Nova had tracked Orion Voss across star systems, a former military cyborg. He'd gone rogue after discovering Project Astra's, a clandestine program designed to create supremely efficient weapons of war. By combining human consciousness with advanced cybernetics, rumor had it that Orion had stolen the project's data core and fled, vowing revenge on those who'd turned him into a half-man, half-machine soldier. The Directorate feared what he might do with that knowledge: catalyst bombs, AI-driven warfleets, genetic bioweapons, nightmares for which no security protocol existed. As she neared his quarters, the corridor lights dimmed to a pulsing red, a security alert triggered by her unauthorized access. Nanofibers in her cloak detected the frequency and momentarily suppressed the alert, allowing her to slip past the first lockdown door. She touched a concealed patch on her wrist, and her palm-mounted holodisplay sprang to life, showing a three-dimensional map of the sector. Asterisk wards. Deck 42. The target was just beyond that next hatch. She wedged a slender shock dip bar into the hatch's magnetic seal, and with a hiss of escaping charge, the door slid open. Nova slipped inside, and the door sealed behind her, cutting off the red glow. The room was nearly empty. A Spartan workstation, a single suspended cot bolted to the wall, and an array of tiny data shards hovering above the terminal like a swarm of metallic insects. Orion's face reflected in their blue sheen, hollow cheeks, determined eyes, the faintest tremor in his right hand. He was unarmed, perfect. Nova's lips curved into a predatory smile. She activated the Lacrimosa Edge. It bloomed into crystalline brilliance, the size and shape of a traditional short sword, but impossibly light. Its edge hummed at subsonic frequency, designed to disrupt molecular bonds at the point of contact. In one smooth motion, she closed the 5 meters between them, lunged and swung with all the force she could muster. But Orion moved with preternatural speed, cybernetic reflexes, the Zigan neural accelerator, something she hadn't anticipated. In a blur, he stepped aside, angled his left arm, and caught the blade by its hilt, and with only one hand. Sparks erupted as the blade's plasma edge met the reinforced titanium of his forearm. The shockwave reverberated through the floor, rattling the data shards into frantic dance. Nova staggered, scarcely believing her senses. The blade's weight dropped off instantly. She tried to pull back, but Orion's grip held tight. His eyes, augmented by a glowing amber implant, locked onto hers with calm intensity. "Now you'll see why that was a mistake," he said, voice low and resonant, the tone of a man who had suffered betrayal but refused to be broken. For a heartbeat, Nova froze, heart pounding, mind scrambling. Then every instinct screamed at her, mission first. She kicked off the wall, twisting her body midair to wrench the blade free. It slid from his grasp with a hiss and clattered against the deck. She rolled into a crouch, hands searching for the backup Vibrik knife strapped to her boot. Orion didn't let go. He advanced in a measured pace, no rage, no malice, only the unflinching purpose of a soldier who now stood in her path. "I never wanted this," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "but you owe me more than a paycheck. You owe yourself the truth." Nova's eyes narrowed. She pressed her palm against the hatch controls, sending a silent request for lockdown, but Orion reached out, fingers brushing the panel, and it blinked green. The station's AI had been overridden. No help would come. You're the weapon they paid me to use. She spat. I pay them. I decide. Only because they told you to, Orion replied. Stepping forward, no one told them to turn me into a monster. I chose this path to escape them. They circled each other in the small room. The data shards now static watching. Nova thumped her boots on the deck, sending tiny waves of kinetic energy through the metal plating. Orion shifted to the side, scanning her stance. Plasma conduits in the walls began to glow, preparing to reroute power to the entire deck. If she didn't end this quickly, the station itself might become a weapon. Nova lunged again, this time, aiming not for his center but for the power port at his hip. Orion caught her strike once more, still one-handed, and with barely a flick, she found herself thrown backward. The force pinned her against the opposite wall. The lacrimosa edge clattered free, embedding itself in the metal plating. We can stop this, he said, stepping close enough that she could see the tiny scars around his artificial eye, each one a reminder of the surgery that had cost him his humanity. Come with me. We'll bring down Astros together. Nova's breath came in ragged gasps. The fusion core's tremor was growing, a subtle alarm rippling through the station's skeleton. Seconds counted. She stared at him, the perfect killer facing a broken soldier. Doubt flickered within her, a dangerous anomaly. But duty burned. Hotter, she yanked the vibric knife free and thrust it upward in one fluid motion. Orion caught it again, the blade's harmonic hum vibrating against his bones. Yet he did not flinch. He caught her gaze, and for an instant, something passed between them, understanding, sorrow, hope. Then the moment shattered as the deck shuddered violently. A plasma conduit in the ceiling detonated, sending a shower of sparks and scalding insulation. Orion's grip loosened, and Nova tumbled into the shards of data swirling on the deck. Breathing hard, she scrambled back. The lacrimosa edge lay just out of reach, still embedded in the metal. Orion strode to it, pulled it free with one hand, and turned to face her, blade aloft. But he did not strike. Instead, he deactivated the plasma edge with a flick of his wrist. Its glow faded to a cold, lifeless crystal. Enough, he said, voice steady. Your mission is over. Nova stared, chest heaving. The silent assassin had been bested by the man she was paid to kill, and in that moment, as the fusion corsum rose to a deafening peak, she realized this encounter was just the beginning of a greater war, one that would test not only her blade, but her very soul. The aftershocks from the plasma conduit explosion still rattled Nebula Station's girders. When Nova Drake rose from the shattered data shards, dust motes danced in the harsh corridor lights, and the lingering hiss of overtaxed cooling vents filled the tense silence between her and Orion Voss. She clutched the vibric knife in one hand, her knuckles white, as she assessed the man before her, a silhouette half cloaked in shadow, half illuminated by the faint glow of his still active cybernetic implants. Orion's left arm, the one reinforced with titanium and nanofiber musculature, hummed softly, its sensors feeding him real-time diagnostics of the station's failing systems. His right hand held the lacrimosa edge with the casual familiarity of an artist holding a brush. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, till lethal weapons come alive. Neither willing to yield. Nova broke the standoff first. She launched forward, blade aimed at his exposed throat, eyes narrowed with unspoken fury. In that instant, she was the predator again, the perfect assassin executing a flawless strike. Yet Orion moved with uncanny grace, stepping onto her blade's path and knocking the vibric knife aside with a single twist of his arm. The impact sent a shockwave through her wrist, forcing her to gasp. You're strong, she hissed, snatching back her weapon and spinning into a low crouch. But I've trained for stronger. Training is only as good as your convictions, Orion replied, voice calm yet charged with energy. You fight for money, I fight for truth. Nova lunged, fainting high, then dropping low in a sweeping arc. His titanium shin guard cracked against her blade's plasma edge, sparks scattering like fireflies in the gloom. With lightning reflexes, Orion gripped her forearm, twisting her momentum into a forward roll. She sprang up behind him, delivering a roundhouse kick to his back that sent him crashing through the workstation console, data shards scattering like dying embers. Alarms blared as the station's AI reeled from the overload of security breaches. Red strobes flashed down the corridor, and an automated voice intoned, "Warning, plasma containment unstable. Evacuate immediately." The warning cut through the cacophony of their battle, echoing ominously through the metal halls, seizing. The moment, Orion surged to his feet and disengaged. He backed away, pressing a fingertip to a hidden control panel. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a narrow maintenance crawl space. "You don't have to kill me," he said, voice tinged with urgency. "This station is going critical. You need to get out." Nova hesitated, blade wavering. Her pulse thundered in her ears as conflicting orders warred in her mind. Finish the mission, or heed the man who just bested her twice. She took a calculated step forward. "Why would I trust you?" she spat. "Because if you stay, neither of us walks away," Orion replied, gesturing toward the widening fissure in the corridor floor where molten plasma seeped through. "Project Asteris's core data is about to overload the station's systems. The directorates want you in, not out." A chill coursed through Nova as she glanced at the glowing fissure. The plasma's white-hot glow threatened to ignite the deck. She forced her breathing steady. "I don't care about their secrets." "Then at least help me stop them," Orion pressed. "You're the only one who can navigate these maintenance shafts together. We can reach the central nexus and override the fail-safes." Nova's grip on the vibrock knife loosened. She recalled the first time she'd taken a life-cold, precise, emotionless. Tonight she'd been the blade, but something in Orion's amber gaze stirred a fragment of doubt. Before she could respond, a tremor shook the station, and the lights dimmed. "Time's up," Orion said, already stepping toward the crawl space. He disappeared into the narrow passage, the panel sliding shut behind him. Nova stared at the sealed wall, her instincts warring with an unfamiliar impulse to follow. She sprinted to the panel and slashed at the locking mechanism. The nanofiber seal hissed and gave way under her blade. There was no more time for hesitation. With a fluid motion, she sheathed her blade, sliding it back along her belt, and dove into the crawl space after him. The shaft was barely 2 meters high, walls slick with coolant residue. Dim, emergency lights flickered every few meters, casting long, wavering shadows. Orion's silhouette flickered ahead, moving swiftly over grated floors and piping clusters. Nova followed in silence, each step echoing in the confined space, heartbeat thumping in her ears. After several tense minutes, the crawlway opened into a maintenance atrium, a cavernous room filled with coils of hydraulic tubing and massive energy conduits. At its center stood the station's Nexus core, a cylindrical reactor ring pulsing with emerald light, wires snaking into its surface like ivy. Control panels lined one wall, their screens dark but for a single blinking cursor awaiting input. Orion approached the console, fingers dancing across virtual keys. "I need you to hold off any security bots while I enter the override command," he said without looking up. "Can you do that?" Nova hefted her blade, stepping to the atrium's edge. "Watch me." From overhead, to maintenance drones hovered into view, sleek, spider-like machines programmed to engage intruders as they descended, their laser-guided arms extended. Nova braced herself, plasma blade humming. She leaped forward, spinning, into a low slash that severed the first drone's central stabilizer. It crashed into a tangle of pipes, sparks flying. The second drone fired a laser burst. Nova deflected it with the blade's edge and crossed the distance in one bound, twisting midair to tear its circuitry from the main frame hatched behind her. The Nexus core's hum deepened a warning tone that swelled like a dirge. Orion's voice crackled through the atrium. "I'm in just 1 more second." Nova sheathed her blade and covered him as 5 more drones emerged, their red targeting lights converging. She stood firm, back toward Orion, every muscle coiled. The first volley of laser fire ignited the deck around her. She pivoted, parrying each shot with near-photonic precision, her cloak and blade reflecting a cascade of light. Sparks and embers danced in the air at her feet. At last, a green pulse from the control console signified override acceptance. Orion slapped the final sequence into place and punched the execute glyph. The Nexus core's pulsing light stuttered, then regained a steady, muted glow. the station's emergency lights shifted from red to amber. Nova cut through the remaining drones with effortless efficiency, each strike precise, almost surgical. When the last drone collapsed, she turned to Orion, breathing hard, blades still glimmering. Orion lowered his arm, sweat beading on his synthetic scalp. Containment protocols restored, he announced. The station's stable for now. Nova studied him, the adrenaline ebbing, revealing the raw truth beneath her conditioning. They'd done the impossible battle together, saved the station. She was sent to infiltrate, and in the process, forged an unspoken alliance. Orion turned to her, the glow of his amber eye soft. You saw why cutting me in half was a mistake. Nova's lips quirked in a wry smile. She deactivated the plasma edge. Its hum faded. I saw you caught it. Her hand hovered over her belt, then lowered. Now what? Orion offered a nod toward the corridor they'd come through. Now we escape, and then we take down Asters from the inside. They moved side by side, blades and cybernetic strength united, as they ventured deeper into the station's belly to former adversaries, bound by choice rather than command, ready to confront the dark secrets that awaited them. The corridor beyond the Nexus atrium opened onto a cavernous chamber so vast it could have housed an entire starship. High above, a lattice of plasma conduits crisscrossed the ceiling like veins, each one glowing with molten white energy. Below them, the plasma forge thrummed a gargantuan ring of interlocking rails and magnetic clamps designed to shape raw plasma into the deadliest warheads in the Directorate's arsenal. The air tasted of ozone and superheated metal, and every surface vibrated with the roar of raw power. Nova Drake and Orion Voss stepped into the chamber side by side, their footsteps swallowed by the roar. Nova's cloak clung to her skin. Orion's cybernetic limbs shimmered under the forge's light. Before them, a cadre of heavy-duty Forgemaster drones, hulking machines with hydraulic arms and heat-resistant plating, scrubbed the rails and calibrated the containment fields. At the far end, a pair of armed security bots patrolled in tight formation, their laser rifles ready. Orion pressed a fingertip to a holopanel projected on the wall. This console controls the primary vent valves, he explained, voice low. If we can reroute the plasma flow, we can overpressure the containment field and force a shutdown. But we'll need to get past those patrol bots, and then I'll have less than 60 seconds to execute the override before the fail-safes kick in. Nova scanned the chamber. The drones, though massive, operated on predictable loops, and the patrol bots kept their backs to the main forge, leaning close. She whispered, "Give me a distraction." He nodded, stepping back, synchronizing with the station's AI. He triggered an auxiliary alarm in the opposite sector. Instantly, klaxons wailed and red emergency lights flared on the far wall. The Forgemaster drones paused, their optic sensors swiveling toward the noise. Two security bots detached from their patrol, marching with bright, staccato strides toward the source of the alarm. "Now," Orion said, launching himself forward. He sprinted across the polished floor with astonishing speed, weaving between hydraulic presses. Nova followed, blade humming in anticipation. They reached the holopanel simultaneously. Orion's fingers danced across the virtual keys as Nova covered him, eyes flicking to the chamber entrance. The remaining patrol bot word to life and trained its laser rifle on them. Nova stepped in front of Orion, blade held high. The bot fired a volley of scorching blue beams. She parried each blast, sparks dancing off her blade's plasma edge. With a twisting flourish, she closed the distance, slashing through its power. Pack! The bot convulsed, its circuits frying, and collapsed into smoldering scrap. Orion's finger hovered over the final override glyph. "Almost there," he murmured. Sweat gleamed on the synthetic scalp above his visor. Behind them, the Forgemaster drones had recovered from the false alarm and turned their heavy arms toward the forge's control conduits. They began issuing urgent repair protocols, enough to slow the countdown, but not stop it. 50 seconds, the onboard AI intoned. Its synthetic voice echoed through the chamber, each word magnified by the metal surfaces. Nova spotted an access shaft leading up to the plasma conduits. "Cover me," she called. Sprinting toward the grated hatch, she vaulted up the wall supports, wedged herself into the narrow shaft, and began tracing the thick conduits toward a junction box. Orion hit the override glyph, execute. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the forge's hum escalated into a keening crescendo. The containment ring glowed brighter. Arcs of plasma danced along its inner surface as the magnetic clamps strained at molecular limits. Now, Orion shouted. Nova reached the junction box and tore away the heat shields. Her fingers flying over the exposed wires, the metal glowed. Hot, but her gloves were reinforced with nanofiber insulation. She inserted a splice tool into the circuitry, rerouting the feedback loop. The blue-white glow exploded into a starburst, and sparks cascaded down the conduit like molten rain. Below, the plasma forge shuddered violently. A series of grinding snaps echoed as bolts sheared and power bursts flared. For a heartbeat, the chamber was bathed in a blinding flash, and every panel and pipe trembled. Then, abruptly, the forge's roar cut out the conduits, dimming to a soft red glow as the containment field collapsed into safe shutdown. The station's AI announced, "Emergency shutdown complete. Forge power levels nominal. Restrictions lifted." But the victory came at a price. The overload had sent shockwaves through the entire chamber. A Forge Master drone's arm buckled under the strain and collapsed onto the grated floor, sending shards of molten alloy spraying. A second later, two nearby maintenance hatches ruptured, releasing superheated gas that billowed in scalding waves. Nova dropped from the conduit shaft as the ceiling vents blasted superheated exhaust. She rolled to avoid the worst of it, then charged across the floor, dodging the molten fragments. Orion met her halfway, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a reinforced bulkhead. They slammed through just as the wave of gas engulfed the forge, the door sealing behind them with a hydraulic hiss. They stood panting in a narrow maintenance corridor, the echo of destruction muffled by thick plating. Nova's cloak was singed, and the hem of her boots glowed faintly where molten alloy had buried itself. Orion's right arm bore a streak of burned wiring, sparks flickering at the wrist. For a long moment, they simply stared at one another, two warriors bloodied but unbeaten. Nova brushed a strand of hair from her face, her silver eyes reflecting both triumph and dawning realization. "I almost didn't make it," she admitted. Orion shook smoldering fragments from his shoulder plating. "You would have," he offered her the lacrimosa edge, now dimmed to lifeless crystal. "But you didn't have to do it alone." She accepted the blade, its weight surprisingly heavy without the hum of plasma. "We make a good team," she said quietly. He nodded, voice softening. "Next, we head for the command bridge. If we can upload the Asterisk data to the public network, the Directorate won't be able to bury the truth." Nova slung the blade over her back. "Then let's go burn down the skies." Together, they stepped out of the forge's shadow and into the station's central arteries, determined to expose the darkness that had forged them both. Flashing emergency lights guided Nova Drake and Orion Voss through the winding arteries of Nebula Station, each corridor more foreboding than the last. The blast from the plasma forge had fractured decks, severed power conduits, and thrown security protocols into chaos. Somewhere ahead lay the command bridge, the nerve center of the station, and the only place from which they could broadcast the stolen Asterisk data to every relay in the sector. Behind them, alarms blared and distant explosions rattled the ribs of the station. Ahead of them, the Directorate's remaining forces would hunt them like rabid dogs. They moved in silence at first, each step measured. Nova's cloak still bore the scars of molten alloy. Orion's right arm crackled with raw wiring. They reached a junction where a trio of battle drones, their weapon mounts glowing hot, rounded the corner. Nova raised a hand. Orion slipped beside, her bionic muscles tensing. With a nod, Nova darted forward in a blur of motion, Lacrimosa's edge humming as she tore into the nearest drone's stabilizer joint. Metal shards sprayed like bullets as the drone collapsed. Orion fired a burst from his wrist-mounted pulse cannon, shredding the second drone's sensory cluster. The third wheeled to face them, but Nova was already past it. She vaulted over the console, slammed her blade through its core reactor, and drove it off balance until it fell inert. No words were exchanged as they sprinted on, each conflagration of sparks behind them lit their faces in fleeting portraits of determination. The corridors narrowed and dipped, the walls bowing as if crushed under the station's own mass. Occasionally, a wall panel would hiss open and release a cloud of coolant that scuttled across the deck. In crystalline clouds, tactical vapor barriers meant to slow intruders. At one choke point, Nova and Orion crouched behind a fallen bulkhead, listening to the heavy footfalls of a security squad. A platoon of armored troopers, flak vests bristling with ammo pouches, passed within sight. Scanning with lethargic alertness. "They'll notice in 30 seconds, Orion muttered. Checking the holo display on his forearm, the projected map blinked red in the overlay. The command bridge lay 3 corridors north, 2 levels up. But the shortest path was through a sector swarming with reinforcements. Nova's silver eyes flicked to the ventilation duct above. "Up there," she whispered. Orion's bio-optic pupil widened. "Can you slip through?" She grinned. "Watch me." Nova leapt, planted her boots on the duct's wall plate, and kicked it free. The grate clattered down, and she disappeared. Into the darkness, Orion followed, his enhanced frame compacting itself to squeeze through. Inside, the duct was hot and claustrophobic, panels slick with condensation. For every meter they advanced, they could hear the troopers' boots clattering on the deck below, shouting orders that echoed like thunder. Finally, they reached the vent above the bridge's outer airlock. Nova peered through the grill and saw the bridge in chaos. Half the stations had offline displays. The others showed static or burning code as the AI desperately reconfigured. A dozen troopers patrolled within, and at the center console, Commander Rahl, head of station security, pounded fists on the holoboard, barking orders through a calm dash link. Orion placed a finger on Nova's shoulder. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1. He yanked the grate free, and they dropped into the bridge in a synchronized arc. Nova's blade bloomed, parrying the stun baton of the nearest trooper. Sparks flew as Orion roared, his cybernetic leg sweeping another trooper off his feet. Alarms tripped at the impact, and troopers began to converge from all sides. "Commander." Rahl wheeled around, bronzed skin gleaming in the emergency lights, his face a mask of righteous fury. "Voss, Drake, you're both under arrest for treason against the Directorate." He thumbed a button on his rifle, and a pulse net launcher charged. Nova's eyes narrowed. She sprinted for the central uplink terminal while Orion engaged Rawls. Guards, each blow from his enhanced fists bending armor like paper. The command bridge's gravity floated scraps of debris in slow arcs. At the uplink, Nova spun the Lacrimosa edge into the data port, fracturing its seal, and prepared to insert the quantum shard containing the Astris files. Commander Rahl burst through the fray, fist raised to slam Nova back. Orion intercepted him, metal elbow clashing with flesh, and sent Rahl stumbling into the holoboard. The console panels shattered, spraying neon glyphs into the air. "Do it," Orion shouted as he grappled with 2 troopers. Nova jammed the shard home. The terminal hummed as secure firewalls collapsed before the quantum decryption. Lines of code scrolled faster than the eye could track, out in the void. Every calm relay and media uplink flickered, then burst into life. For a moment, there was only static. Then, across every channel, the Astris dossier materialized, irrefutable proof of clandestine experiments, human rights violations, sentient cog implants, and the Directorate's plans for planetary subjugation. Pandemonium erupted. Some troopers dropped their weapons to watch the evidence scroll. Rahl groaned, pushing himself up, eyes wild as he saw his own command's crimes laid bare for the galaxy. Orion shattered the stun baton in his hand, tossing the remnants aside. "Run!" Nova yelled as the station's AI triggered and uncontrolled. Decompression protocol, emergency bulkheads closing, life support hissing down. She and Orion dashed for the airlock as the bridge transformed into a death trap. Rahl, wounded and broken, could only watch as the uplink continued streaming. They burst through the turbolift doors moments before the bridge sealed itself. In a starburst of closing plates, the corridor beyond was still intact just barely. The deck buckled under the internal pressures. The station moaned in silence. They made their way to the nearest escape shuttle bay. Orion keyed his arm calm into the panel. "Override." he commanded. With a hiss, the bay doors parted, revealing the black expanse of space. A lone shuttle sat waiting, its engines idling in alarm mode. They sprang aboard, slamming the hatch behind them. Alarm klaxons cut off as the shuttle sealed. Nova keyed the comm. Broadcast complete. Asterisk data live across all sectors. The shuttle jettisoned from the station just as the bulkheads behind them imploded, sending a spine of molten metal tumbling into the void. Nebula Station's silhouette ruptured in fiery blossoms, sections flaring then extinguishing as trenches of plasma dripped into space. Inside the shuttle's cockpit, Nova exhaled, watching the station shrink. Orion sat beside her, the glow of the dashboard reflecting in his amber eye across every channel. The galaxy now knew the truth, and the Directorate's grip was broken. Nova turned to him, voice soft. "You were right," Orion offered a tired smile, reaching out with his unscarred hand. "We all deserve the chance to choose." As the shuttle pulsed into the starfield, they left the dying station to its fate to former enemies, bound by a shared choice, hurtling toward a future forged in light rather than shadow.